let's talk about leadership in the context of diplomacy. And I want to talk to you in the context of what we did during the G20 presidency, because there was a lot of trepidation, there was a lot of nervousness on whether we will finally get a New Delhi declaration or not. I was there in that room in the morning where it wasn't clear whether a declaration would be signed or not. And you walked in there and finally there was a smile on your face, and it looked like, okay, the deal is done. But through what happened, not just in the 48 hours to get that declaration done, but through the course of the presidency, explain to me the leadership that India displayed and what you took away from that. You'll have to use this one as well.
So Shireen, first and foremost, the Prime Minister and the theme of the presidency was being selected, which was critical. The Prime Minister went into the roots of Indian civilization, which was to take it back to Vasudev Kutumbakam, and he said that while we may have different geographical boundaries, we may have different political ideologies, but we must in G20 all act as one. For the common good of the citizens. And that remained the overwhelming philosophy throughout G20. And actually, we were passing through a very, very complex and a very difficult phase of the Russia-Ukraine crisis, and it was across all ministerials that we suffered actually for lack of consensus. And it was broadly felt by everyone that we will not be able to arrive at consensus. But despite that, the Prime Minister was very clear that we must be ambitious, we must be very, very inclusive, we must be decisive, and we must be very action-oriented. These were the four things he defined it. And the first and foremost was that we made it inclusive by making G20 into a G21 by bringing African Union as a member of G20. So by one stroke, we included 55 countries of Africa as a member. Secondly, we were able to push the boundaries on all these areas. We were able to bring consensus on almost 212 outcomes and 83 paras. This has never happened before. And one para, the Russia-Ukraine crisis, it took us 300 hours of negotiation. It took us about close to 16 drafts failed. Only the 17th draft succeeded. We had about 258 bilaterals meetings for that. But all through, the Prime Minister was getting a situation report every 2 hours. He said, I want consensus. And he talked to me and he said that in case, you should tell these people that if G20 cannot arrive at a consensus, India will not be a part of G20. And with 6 hours to go, we had not arrived at a consensus at that point. And 6 hours to go, the last Sherpa meeting, I just walked into the hall. We knew everybody's red line. We said, this is the last and final draft. You take it, either you take it or you lump it, and if you don't accept it, India will not be a part of G20. India will work with BRIC. India will work with IPSA, but not be a part of G20. That's my leader has seen this draft, and he feels very strongly that this is the best draft. And we had all the emerging markets together. The Brazil said that his Sherpa said that Lula has seen it. The South African Sherpa said his president said it. And I said within 3 hours you either say yes or no. This happened at 12:30 in the night. By 4 o'clock in the morning, I had a yes from all the G7 countries. That could happen only because of the stature and standing of the Prime Minister. He had traveled to ASEAN, he traveled to America, had built up a very good relationship with Putin, with Biden, and all countries eventually said yes, and if it wasn't for India, this consensus would never have been arrived at. So India achieved consensus because of his leadership, India achieved inclusivity because of his leadership, and India made it very, very action-oriented. This was the story of G20, really. And then, we received consensus from all the G7 countries, but USA we had not yet received it. So in the morning, Prime Minister came to Bharat Mandapam at 8 o'clock to inspect the Bharat Mandapam, and he asked me, "Kya hua?" So I said, "Sir, abhi isme thoda aur kaam baki hai." So he said, then I started telling him, so he said, "Nahi, mujhe procedure nahi, outcome batao." So he's very outcome oriented, totally outcome oriented. And so I said, "Nahi, sir, abhi batata hu aapko thodi." So I phoned up the American Sherpa at about 8:15, then the American Sherpa said, "Amitabh, we want two things. One is we want a change of one word, and we want China and Russia to agree first." So then I phoned up the Chinese Sherpa, whose yes we had not got. So the Chinese Sherpa said, "Yes, because all emerging markets are together, we'll agree. But there's one para which we want to change." So I said, "Why? You've already agreed to everything." So he said, "No, one para is that America will hold G20 in 2026. So he said, my Prime Minister who's come feels that the Americans don't issue visas to China, so you should withdraw that." So the meeting started, and I sat in the next room with the American Sherpa, the Chinese Sherpa. We negotiated for 3.5 hours. The Chinese wanted a written guarantee, but we used the word ensure, and we finally clinched it at 12:30. And 1 o'clock, the Prime Minister announced that there is a consensus, and we clinched it on the first day. So that was all because of that leadership. He said he was totally outcome oriented on that. So that's how G20 was clinched.
Ladies and gentlemen, you got a backstory here from the man himself, the Sherpa representing India.
So, two things. Many people say that the Prime Minister gets into a lot of micro details, but the Prime Minister also gives you a lot of delegated power. Throughout the G20, he gave me all the authority and all the power, but he wanted me to deliver the outcomes on that. And he was absolutely clear, make it inclusive, make it decisive, but deliver the G20 to me. And that's what we were able to do, but all because of his stature, his standing, his personal relationship that he had built up. और 100 शहरों में 100 दिन में 100 डिजिटल मेले करो. तो he said, भाई ये तो बहुत मुश्किल काम है, पर ये तुम ही समझाओ चल के. तो he said, वो एक प्रेजेंटेशन तैयार करो, चलो प्रेजेंटेशन करते हो और कैबिनेट सेक्रेटरी को भी ले चलो. तो we prepared a presentation, and then Mr. P.K. Sinha was there, Mr. Nipin Mishra was there, I was there, I made the presentation. So, after the 7th slide, I said, "Sir, आपके वो निर्देश हैं, 100 दिन में 100 डिजिटल मेले 100 शहरों में, बड़ा मुश्किल है सर, ये इसको अच्छी तरह करने दीजिए, थोड़ा होमवर्क करके करते हैं, ब्रांडिंग वगैरह करके अच्छी तरह." He said, "नहीं, वो 100 दिन में ही 100 करो." So I went on, then I went to about the 18th slide or something, then I said, "Sir, थोड़ा समय दीजिए, बहुत अच्छी तरह करना चाहते हैं, इसको सक्सेस बनाना है, ये वो." He said, "नहीं, मैंने कहा है 100 दिन में ही करूँ, 100 और 100 ही डिजिटल में ले करूँ." तो I kept quiet, and then at the end of about the 28th or 29th slide, which was nearing completion, again I said, "Sir, आपके निर्देश हैं, प्रधानमंत्री जी के जो निर्देश होंगे वो तो पूरा करेंगे, पर सर थोड़ा समय दीजिए, अच्छी तरह करना चाहते हैं इसको और इसको सक्सेस बनाना है." He said, "नहीं, मैंने कह दिया है, 100 दिन में बार ये मत बात करो, 100 दिन में." तो that was the end of it all. And I tell you, we got in those 100 days, we got RBI, we got NPCI, we got the private sector, we got all the state governments, everybody together in 100 days and 100 digital meetings. And if we hadn't done this, today we do 130 billion fast payments in a year. We do 46% of the real-time fast payments in the world. China does only 26 billion. If we hadn't done those, looking back, it was his courage of conviction, his determination, his ability, his vision, which saw us push those 100 digital melas. If we hadn't done it, we would have never got RBI, we'd never have got NPCI, we would have never got all the private banks and the public banks together. We would have never got the private sector of India together to be able to drive the digital payment movement. And that's how it happened. And I think there was relentless preparedness for that, which he made us do. So I'm only speaking from my experience. And similarly for aspirational district, because when he said कि भाई ये जितनी backward district है इनको improve करो, 1 preparation, 2 preparation, 3 preparation, 4 preparation, 4 presentation, 5 presentation, Then he finally, after 5th presentation, he said कि भाई ये है, मुझे केवल data चाहिए, मुझे केवल governance चाहिए, मुझे केवल outcome चाहिए. I've never heard a political leader talking about outcomes. I've never heard a political leader, I've been 44 years in government, other than this Prime Minister, I've never heard a political leader talk about outcomes or data or governance. And these are the three things on which his philosophy revolves. Data, good governance, and outcome. Deliver on outcomes. And that's what we managed to do. We brought in real-time data on a minute-to-minute basis, and that is how, the Baramulla collector walked into my room. He said, "Sir, I'm coming 5th. I'll make up 5 days to go for that month." He said, I'll make up for it, and I'll make sure I come first. I opened the computer in front of him. By the time he'd left Baramulla and come to Delhi, he'd moved to 8th position. So I said, "Tum 5th nahi, 8th aa rahe ho." He went back, worked very hard, but he could only come 3rd, but because it was real-time data working on all these outcomes. So I think that if India is to transform, it can only happen on real-time data, which was not possible when I was a young officer. It's possible now in today's world. And the third thing, what he made us do for the startup India movement. I mean, again, 5-6 rounds of presentations to him. He said, "Nahi, wo is ministry mein incubation hai, is ministry mein regulatory procedures hai, wahan licensing hai, labor laws hai, ye hai, wo hai, ye theek karo, wo theek karo." 6, one after another, 6 presentations. Relentless work, relentless hard work, and that's how, after that, we launched it. He made only no political leader, no officer will sit with him, only the startups sat within that day. And those startups, that time we had just 156 startups in India. Today we have 126,000 startups in India.